We're mixing things up a little bit on the stream. Instead of covering just one story, we're bringing you three. Stay tuned. I'm Femi Oke.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Freezing temperatures haven't stopped hundreds of thousands of Romanians from taking to the streets demanding an end to corruption. And then, fake news. What is it and how can you stop it from spreading?
But first to strikes in Cameroon, a story our community has been asking for us to cover again. Here's what some of you had to say about the ongoing protests.
There should be a referendum to address this situation. He should come to a formal agreement with the leaders of the Anglophone struggle.
From my personal point of view, I do not think the government is actually willing to solve the people's problems.
This is no longer a lawyer teacher's problem. This is a problem of the masses.
The peoples of southern Cameroon have come a long way, especially within the past few months, where our ghost towns have been very effective, our boycotts have been very effective, and civil disobedience have been very massive.
The streets are still heavily militarized, with military trucks parked in all the road junctions. People are not afraid to talk in public because of fear of being arrested.
Since our programme in December about the strikes, the government of Cameroon has pulled the plug on the internet and banned public gatherings in the regions fraught with tensions. What started as strikes for bilingualism in the northwest and southwest territories have revealed very deep political divides that spread beyond language, culture and geography. With more, we're joined by Harmony Bobga Mbuton. He's the president of the Northwest Lawyers Association. Harmony, it's good to have you back with us again. This idea of cutting off the internet in these two provinces in Cameroon, what's been the impact of that?
The impact is that the government has operated under behind the curtains because there is no access to information, easy access to information within the territory anymore. And what it has been carried out has been exactly what happened in Rwanda when the genocide began. And it has been going on behind the curtains, and people have only managed to use their smartphones to ship out images to nearby French-speaking part of Cameroon, where there is still internet connection and they are able to send images and information out to the world. But it's not flowing as it were when there was internet within the territory of southern Cameroon.
I'm just looking at some of the feedback we got from our online community. As Ngori says here, the internet is shut down in southern Cameroon. It's cut off the people from the rest of the world. They do not know what is happening. Now you say genocide is going on. There's no way for us to even check to see if that is possible, if that's happening, because there's no way for us to connect on the internet. How are we getting these stories out? How are people getting their stories out to the rest of the world?
What people do is that the families come together when the security forces come in the night and arrest people and ship them out of the territory. In the morning, the families meet together and they try to put their heads together and go to the police station. The police, the gendarmes, the governors, the administrators, they say they don't know what happened because the operatives, the government operatives are not the ones that are resident within the territory. So they ship them out to Yaoundé or somewhere else that we don't know. No statistics is kept, and so therefore you are unable to ascertain where they have taken the people, but the absence from their family indicates that the people have been arrested and taken away over the night.
This is a really difficult story to keep abreast of, again, because the information is very limited. I'm just looking here back, Harmony, at the programme that you were last on. This is back into December the 19th, 2016, when the Minister of Communication told us on TV that there were going to be negotiations, they were going to be talking to Anglophiles and Francophiles to try and make the situation better for Anglophiles in Cameroon. Have you seen much of that conversation happening? What are negotiations like right now?
In fact, I was part of the negotiations that ensued and took place in Yaoundé on the 27th and the 28th of December. We actually sat in a meeting and the government had constructed the questions that had to be dealt with in the negotiation to suit their own purpose. And what we did was we walked out of the dialogue, and the next thing we had was that they started arresting us, which is what forced me to flee from Cameroon and find myself through Nigeria to here now.
You've had some very high-profile supporters of the, I suppose, just more equity between English-speaking Cameroonians and French-speaking Cameroonians. Often, English-speaking Cameroonians are feeling like they're second-class citizens. Miss Cameroon, for example, spoke out about it's a good thing. It's a good thing for Anglophiles not to be sidelined. And then what happened to her?
Well, I don't think she's living within the territory where the problem is taking place. And the information she deals with to make her assessment is secondary. And I would like to assure you that even though I am out here, my wife and my children are still back in the territory, and I know exactly, the rest of my family are there. We know exactly what is happening there. And it's not a question of, you know, a generalistic assessment.
Sure.
We have people talking to families, and the situation is bad. Today, let me say yesterday, the provocative move to go and show off the African Cup that was won by Cameroon was welcomed with ghost town. People abandoned the streets, and only the entourage from Yaoundé was parading the streets in military vehicles, which means they know that that is a war zone.
Some of the pictures, just to finish off the Miss Cameroon story, she was told that she was no longer Miss Cameroon, that she had to step down, and Miss Cameroon says, I am voted Miss Cameroon by the people of Cameroon. I am not stepping down, just so people understand the end of that story. Getting in information here from Labelle, she says there's been a surge in living expenses as people travel long distances to French-speaking parts to cash out salaries and pensions. The last time we saw some pictures from Cameroon, from the English-speaking parts of Cameroon, there were empty classrooms, people were on strike. Bring us up to date, Harmony. Is that strike going on? Is it still strong?
The strike is still very, very strong, and it is tipping into the point where the population is saying that even with their empty hands and sticks, they are ready to start providing resistance to protect themselves.
Speaking of resistance,
they want to give themselves up.
You're part of the diaspora now. You're outside of Cameroon, and I hear that there are marches and protests happening outside of Cameroon. Tell us more about those.
Yes, I've participated, a day after I arrived here, I participated in one of the protests before the French embassy in Washington, D.C. And there are a lot more that are going on all over the world. I am constantly in touch with people in South Korea, in Germany, in Europe, and in Britain. They have been having street demonstrations in major government premises, asking the international community to go into southern Cameroon and prevent what they folded their arms to happen in Rwanda earlier.
Harmony, thank you so much for helping us understand what's better happening in Cameroon, and we appreciate your update. We will keep following that story very carefully here on the stream. And now, Malika, to Romania.
Yes, thanks, Femi. Now, take a look at one gathering in the capital, Bucharest, last night. It was sent to us by a member of our community. Hundreds of thousands of Romanians have been protesting night after night against political corruption. They've been in the streets since early January, when Prime Minister Sorin Grindeanu proposed executive orders to free thousands of prisoners and decriminalize certain abuses of power. And protesters have enjoyed some victories, pressuring the Prime Minister to withdraw the decriminalization decree and forcing Parliament to hold a no-confidence vote. Well, the government has announced it will hold a referendum. On what, however, remains a mystery. So have the activists achieved what they set out to, or is there more work to do? Well, joining us with his take, Laurențiu Colenteanu is a Romanian journalist. He's currently a senior editor at Euractiv Romania. Welcome back to the stream, Laurențiu. I want to start on my iPad with a headline. This is from Romania Insider. It's a site, a news site. It says, protests in Romania reach their goal. Emergency ordinance on justice is officially terminated. Is this a victory in your eyes?
Oh, well, it is definitely a victory. One must consider it a victory after 22 days of non-stop protests, non-stop meaning that the people came out into Victoria Square in front of the government each and every night. That this, what they call the ordeal of the emergency decrees is over, must be considered a tremendous victory. Because, I mean, this type of pressure from the public, you know, which reached up to hundreds of thousands of people marching onto Victoria Square and across the country in other cities of the country. This is unprecedented for Romania. So at that level of maybe 300,000 people marching in Romania's capital, that has not happened in the 27 years since Romania got rid of communism in the 1989 revolution. So first and foremost, the fact that so many people came out to voice their discontent is a victory per se. Second, of course, that the government was pressured to withdraw these decrees. And third, and maybe the most important thing, is that civil society in Romania has really found its voice again and now knows how to express its desires and takes on sort of a watchdog role.
So I like that you mentioned kind of a three-prong victorious list there, but I want to bring our attention to a Facebook comment we got from Carmen B. She says, people are still very focused on the government's resignation. The decree was just the beginning, and people aren't forgiving them or forgetting. So resignation, that's a lot bigger of a demand than just taking back a decree. Do you think that that's actually something that's feasible?
Well, to be honest, no. There's no clue, no indication whatsoever that this government is going to step down. And even if the movement would continue, I myself do not think that this is a feasible goal at this point. The street, as it is called, has, in my opinion, reached what it could reach at this time. And there's because you guys are very well connected to social media, I want to bring that part into the discussion.
Please.
It's very, very interesting to watch. Very interesting to watch how the hashtags that have been used by the protesters have evolved over these 22 days. Now, they started on with a traditional hashtag protest. Then it morphed into hashtag resist as the people really endured the cold and resisted in the square in front of the government. And then on the last part of the demonstrations, which are gradually winding down at this point, but still when people, when they're posting a status on Facebook voicing discontent with some, let's say, politician saying something, they are now using the hashtag "we are watching you." And this is what I find is most important, and it is the biggest gain of them all, that people are now getting into that, you know, into that mood, into that attitude of like, you guys can no longer govern like you did until now, like you did until January, actually. This is no longer business as usual as Romanian politicians were used to, you know, without many guys voicing their discontent, without a real opposition, you know. And
I love seeing that the evolution basically of these hashtags. It evolved really, and I like that you said that we're still watching you. When you said that, my ears perked up because we actually got a video comment from the very first person who pitched this show to us. This is Adrian, and he says something similar. Take a listen to Adrian.
We woke up and we will be with the eyes on the politician to not be corrupt.
So people will be watching.
That brings it to the point, to the conclusion of this unprecedented manifestation. People are watching, you know, because it's like politicians would like think, yeah, we won an election. We won it actually with a landslide, you know, like the Social Democrats who are in power now, they got 46% of the popular vote, which is huge. One has to admit, and they are legitimized to govern. But winning an election, even be it by a landslide, does not entitle you to govern in spite of the people. It only forces you even more to govern for the people. And that's why the people are saying, you guys were watching you.
So then what do you make of this referendum? We mentioned it at the beginning of this segment. What is it for? What do you think will come out of it?
Well, at this point, we don't really know. I mean, we know in broad terms that the president has decided he would hold a referendum on something related to anti-corruption, or let's say on the broader idea of anti-corruption, which is good per se. I mean, the president does have the absolute and exclusive right to call on a referendum whenever he wants on certain topics on which he's allowed by the Constitution. But The most important thing, and what people actually are waiting for, the people in the streets, we the media as well, is to know what the question will be. Because you're going to have a question on a ballot, and you're supposed to vote yes or no. And the way, the content of the question and the way that it is phrased will give this referendum its real importance. If it's pardon my language, a stupid question, then the referendum is not, people are not going to be drawn to it, you know?
Right.
But if you're going to have a question of like, would you be okay if we passed a law that says that no one ever indicted for corruption charges is to hold public office again? Now that is really a high gamble to put to popular vote.
Do you know what you would put, yes or no?
I think I'd definitely vote yes, yeah.
Laurentu, thank you for joining us on the stream. Please keep us posted as things evolve. And now, back to Femi with a look at something we can't escape these days.
Right now, we're talking about fake news, even dominating the real news. Let me give you an example. This is US President Trump at a press conference back on February the 16th.
You can talk all you want about Russia, which was all a, fake news, fabricated deal. It's all fake news, but I've never seen more dishonest media than, frankly, the political media. The news is fake because so much of the news is fake.
Joining us now, Jason Tanz, editor-at-large at Wired magazine. Jason, thanks for being here. If you were a global citizen watching that press conference and you kept on hearing fake news, fake news, fake news, how would you understand that? How would you even unpack that? What's going on there?
So this is a sort of end point of a longer conversation. Fake news emerged during the presidential election as a problem when stories that were purely fabricated would show up on Facebook and get spread around and go viral.
Yeah.
It was stories like the Pope endorsed Donald Trump, which never happened, but because of the way Facebook worked, it would get shared broadly and widely. And in some cases, it was more widely read than stories from the New York Times.
Yeah.
So there was a concern that people were voting based on misinformation. Now, over time, it became such a talking point that it has morphed now. Donald Trump uses the term fake news to refer to any news that he doesn't like, or anything that's critical of him, or in some sense, any news that doesn't repeat the obvious falsehoods that he would like them to repeat. So in some sense, it's all part of a strategy to really confuse what's really happening and what is not really happening. And it leads to this very confusing world where you don't really know what information to trust.
It all started in a teenager's bedroom in Macedonia. I don't want to jump the gun for the story, but there's a little bit in Wired magazine where you tell that story. So here's a clip so you can see where fake news really came from. Have a look.
At the start of 2016, in a small town called Veles in Macedonia, an 18-year-old high school student discovered that he could make more money than his parents by building fake news sites. To protect his identity, we'll call him Boris. And here's how he did it. He wrote tons of false articles about the US election, most of them salacious. The articles were shared on Facebook, garnering tons of traffic. So much so that Boris's most popular website earned him $16,000 over the course of a few months. That's way higher than the average monthly salary in Macedonia, which is $371.
So Jason, here we are in February 2017, way past the election. Jiho Park says here on Twitter, what's the difference between fake news and the alternative press?
Well, that's a good question. I would say that fake news, as it was initially defined, is purely without doing any reporting, without having any even pretense of truth. People would just make stuff up, essentially, and publish it. And they did it to get rich. And they were able to do that because people that wanted that news to be true would respond to it and spread it. We live in a world now where readers are essentially the same as publishers and editors. And so if somebody reads something that hews to their biases, they're likely to have an emotional response that gets them to share it. And that has, in some sense, replaced a lot of traditional editorial values. So the question now is, can we put that genie back in the bottle, so to speak?
Rada says here, with social media, we are all both consumers and producers. We should figure out a serious rating mechanism. Is that even possible?
Well, yeah, the problem is we kind of have a rating mechanism right now, right? There's the number of likes that something gets on Facebook, the number of shares it gets. The problem is that we we are not particularly equipped as individuals to determine whether or not a news story is true or not. And again, Facebook tends to, the kind of news that works best is stuff that generates an emotional response, not an intellectual response, or something that challenges our beliefs. It's usually the stuff that confirms our beliefs that we want to share. So to some sense, it falls to the likes of Facebook to develop systems to stop the spread of fake news, just as they've stopped spam and pornography and things like that. And they are working on that after initially kind of resisting it. They have kind of accepted a responsibility to deal with that. It also falls to us, to be honest, to not share news. It's like a disease, right? If you see something that seems too good to be true and you share it, that's essentially like spreading disease. So it falls to us to, if something seems too good to be true, especially if it confirms our biases just a little too neatly, to at least investigate.
Give us an example, Jason, of that. So if you see a story that does what or says what, can you give us an example?
Well, it's very hard to know for sure, right?
Yeah.
There were reports, for instance, that Donald Trump had pressed pause during the recording of his conversations with the Russian government on the recordings, right? These have to be recorded by law. That proved not to be true, but it certainly could have been true based on the behavior. So I think the answer is you have to look at the source and you have to look at the history of publication. If this is a source that has sprung up over the last week or two, if it's an account on Twitter that's an egg and not a person, if it's not a verified
that's
account,
a giveaway, right?
That's a potential giveaway. It's tricky because the promise of the internet is that we're going to get news from all sorts of sources that had been shut out of the discourse before. So that's actually a very promising thing, and the mainstream media in a lot of ways has tended to tamp down that kind of discourse. So the promise of the internet is that we're hearing voices that we haven't heard from before. The challenge is that, we saw in Cameroon, for instance, that shutting down the internet is a great way of preventing people from knowing what's happening. Another good way of preventing people from knowing what's happening is to do the opposite and clog it with so much junk that nobody can separate true from false. And that's the opposite, yet similar kind of challenge that we're facing here.
Jason, just very quickly, do you think this is a trend that people will stop eventually saying fake news? It feels like if you don't like what somebody's saying, it's fake news. If you're not sure that you like it, it's fake news. Do you think it's just going to be a trend where people will just eventually get tired of it and stop using that term?
Well, they may stop using the term. I don't think they're going to stop thinking that stuff that they tend to disagree with is inherently biased. That's a very human trait, and it's something we've seen well before the internet. A lot of people don't like what the New York Times reports, and so they dismiss that as biased. A lot of people don't like what Fox News reports, and so they cite that as biased. The challenge is to think beyond what we want to be true and look really hard at what's actually being written and spread. Real wisdom
from Jason Tanz about fake news. Thank you very much, Editor-at-Large from Wired Magazine. And now, Malika has a look at another story our community has asked us to cover with our lead section.
Well, thanks to all of your pitches, we're following the latest out of Pakistan, beginning with an attack at a courthouse in the northwestern town of Charsada, which killed at least 6 people on Tuesday. Now, police in the area are being lauded for their reaction, with many online saying their work kept the attack from being far deadlier. Arslan tweets, "The professionalism and spirit of the police shows how resilient this nation is." Now, this follows a week of heavy violence across the country, including an explosion at a Sufi shrine last Friday, the country's deadliest attack since 2014's Peshawar shooting. At least 88 people were killed in the Friday attack, for which ISIL claimed responsibility, and there were difficulties treating the injured. The province's health minister told Al Jazeera that Sahwan's medical facilities are not equipped to deal with an emergency of that size, which Twitter users lamented. How can you treat several injured victims on a couple of beds in a single hospital? Journalist Nazia Mehman asks. Well, others came together to support the medics and donate blood, as you can see in this photo from Gibran. Now, some online shared tips earlier in the week after the Lahore attack, like this promotion from car booking service Careem. It offers free rides to the hospital for people donating blood. Well, the day after the attack in Sahwan, people gathered at the shrine in solidarity with the victims and to continue the Sufi dancing ceremony that was interrupted by the explosion. And among them was classical dancer Shima Kimani. Now, photos and video of her dancing have been widely shared and praised online. Famed human rights lawyer Asma Jehangir called Kirmani's participation in the ceremony, quote, "the greatest challenge to those who want to stop us from enjoying our culture through force." course. We'll be keeping an eye on this, so send us your pitches with hashtag AJStream.